Hey everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up Warchant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town. From the college football capital of the world, welcome into the Warchant.com pregame show live. We're taping this Friday night here at the Georgia Freight Depot in the heart of downtown Atlanta. Ryan Kelly and Gene Williams here with you from Warchant.com. Going to just do a brief little podcast today. I don't think we're hitting this on the radio, but we are going to get this on the podcast. So those of you who may be listening on the drive up, you're welcome. Maybe just a little quick something for you to get on the drive if you're making it from Tallahassee or Jacksonville or North Florida. But I'll tell you what, Gene.
Or sitting in traffic. If the folks that are here listening, you're sitting in traffic, I'm sure on your way to the – what I got a tour today, and we can talk about that a little bit, the $1.5 billion Mercedes-Benz Stadium. If you're in traffic, you could be listening to this as well. Very easy to get. You want to tell the folks, how can you get the podcast?
Well, of course, you can get it on iTunes, Podcast Republic, warchantradio.com is, of course, on our website. We have it on YouTube now, and I'm surprised at how much that's taken off. I mean, we've had a lot of things, but, yeah, you can listen to it in the car. You can listen to us in the morning, actually, on 97.9 if you're in Tallahassee. And you can listen to us if you're on the world's largest parking lot known as I-85 trying to make it to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It has been nuts today. And a lot of people who just follow college football and aren't completely into everything, this opening weekend where there's the Chick-fil-A kickoff, there's also a huge comic book convention in Atlanta, too. There's Dragon Con. So there's all sorts of people. There's college football fans. There's folks dressed up in superhero costumes. It is a crazy, crazy experience. And for the first time ever, it's going to be a crazy experience at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And, Gene, I know you got to tour that a little bit earlier. How was it? Is it worth the hype? Let me just ask it that way.
It's worth it. You can tell they spent over $1 billion on this thing. It's crazy. I wish I didn't get to see what they call the Halo, the 360-degree video monitor they have up there. They didn't have that on at the time, but it looks really cool. I kind of like the setup. On one side, you've got open glass. You can see the cityscape of Atlanta. It's really cool. You've got what I like, kind of 100 yards. I think they call it the 100-yard club or something like that, where it's 100 yards of basically like neighborhood-type bars. And this is the stat that blew me away they told me about. Do you believe the old Georgia Dome only had 30 beer taps?
That's insane.
That's it. They did a lot of, I guess, cans and stuff like that, so very few beer taps. You want to talk about a percentage increase. You went from 30, now the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium, 1,264 beer taps.
And not to get too economic, but when you have that many, you can have a lot of local breweries. And that makes a lot of local folks happy, and it helps local business.
And it's $5 a beer. That's the whole thing. The price points are way down. They were telling us $2. You get a soda. You get a cup for $2, and you could refill it.
And it's amazing to me, just you can go to CenturyLink up in Seattle. You can go to Everbank Field or Raymond James in the state of Florida. The prices are always just so crazy at these big pro times. Even, I mean, not to take shots, but even at Doak Campbell, the prices at a concession stand can be so crazy.
Oh, I know.
So the fact that they have this, I think it's a big win. And, of course, the Falcons are going to play there. There's going to be the national championship there this year. Atlanta United FC is going to play there. It's going to be a lot of fun, and there's so much stuff that they're going to do here. This is a great event. And, of course, like I said, this is a great event that we're at here Friday from the Atlanta Seminole Club.
Sold this out. The tailgate tomorrow is sold out. So just Seminole Nation, we were sitting out actually there's probably 10 of them in Atlanta, one of the Taco Max for lunch. And I was sitting there with some folks covering the Alabama site and rivals, and they were like thinking it was almost all FSU fans in there. It was great to see FSU fans representing so well up in Atlanta. It's a big booster organization up here, the Atlanta Seminole Club. Jessica, they do such a great job here. So it's great to see. Oh, the other thing that was really cool, and we've got a photo gallery up on Warchant. You want to see some of the Mercedes-Benz pictures. Really cool tribute to the high school football here in the state of Georgia. They had a giant wall with every helmet of every high school football team represented up there. It had all the state championship information. That was really cool.
I saw there was a Letterman jacket from our friends at Thomasville High, who's, of course, in our coverage area right in our neck of the woods just north of Tallahassee. So
how about that?
So it's a cool thing. It's a cool atmosphere, and this is just going to be – we've talked so much about this game, Gene. Fall camp's gone on for a month, and then there's a week of practice that you're just ready to be there. And just the atmosphere that's built in this place, it's so similar. It's amazing to me when you rewind the clocks back to 2007, the last time these two teams played in Jacksonville. There was so much hype. There was so much. And this is going to top even that. Like, just to see that. But
if there was only somebody we could talk to who played in that game in 2007, 10 years ago, when Jimbo Fisher was the offensive coordinator and Nick Saban was his first year as Alabama's head coach, could there be somebody here maybe we could talk to about
I don't know,
that?
Gene. Maybe there's somebody to your left you'd like to introduce.
All right, let's introduce him. Ladies and gentlemen, here at the Atlanta Seminole Club party and everybody listening to the Warchant Radio podcast, this is Xavier Lee. You may remember, who led Florida State to victory the last time they played Alabama. Round of applause. Well, X, first of all, thanks for joining us. Tell the folks what you've been up to these days.
Gaining weight. Father time is not that friendly. But no, I've transitioned from football and athletics to the business realm. I work with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise now, so I do field sales in Nebraska, Dakotas, and Iowa. So I've driven my, networking skills to kind of be a manager in my territory now, and that's what I'm doing now.
Well, you're here. Obviously, you're still a big FSU fan. And what has it been like watching the last few years and how well they've done under Jimbo Fisher?
It's been great to see how he's turned the program around. I know when I left, it was kind of declining or trying to climb back up. And, I had a chance in the spring to see the facilities and just see the atmosphere that Florida State has now. And it's amazing just to see kind of what, I was able to – a little bit I did was kind of awesome to see, and see what it's transitioned to now, to see the prestige and the facilities, the uniforms, the buzz, the fans. I mean, it's just amazing to see where it was when I was there to what it is now.
Well, let's reminisce a little bit. 10 years ago, not much has happened in the first half. You get thrown out there. I know you had the big play to Cody Fagg. Just what do you remember from that second half and rallying FSU and coming up with that big win?
What I remember most is that Jimbo prepared us very well, and everything that Alabama did, we were expecting. So when it came around in the second half, we knew what we had to do, and we just had to execute. And I think we lacked on that in the first half on execution, and we were able to do that in the second half and put some points on the board.
Who was it that ended up giving you the call that you were headed in? Was it Coach Bowden? Was it Coach Fisher?
I believe it was Woody, and that way at the time was Jimbo's right-hand man. So he told me, X, warm up, it's your time. I was nervous, eating nachos on the sideline and throwing the game.
So when Drew goes out, you go in. What's the first thing going through your mind as you're headed to that huddle?
First pass, don't throw in the dirt. So the first play was a little swing pass to Preston Parker. He got 6-7 yards, and after that I got the jitters out of me. Then 2 plays later was a QB sneak, and I got hit really hard, and that was perfectly what I needed to get the butterflies out, get rattled, and keep going.
Now, Ira did an interview with you a little while ago, if you read on warchant.com, talking about that game. It was interesting, your comments about Jimbo Fisher. And I guess you could say you could tell he was a little bit more hyped up playing against Saban than he would for a normal game. Just tell us what was that week like leading up to that game, interacting with Coach Fisher?
The good thing is we had a week to train, so it was coming right off of our bye week. So we had a chance to look at their film, look at the loss that it just came off of, and where we could hurt them. And Jimbo was already amped up. He knew that Saban's defense, his tendencies right off the bat, so it was just up to us to kind of execute. So he had a great game plan from start to finish. Will be some good home run plays here and there, and it all worked out really well.
Go ahead, Gene.
I was going to get your insight on DeAndre Francois. I mean, obviously a position you're very familiar with, and a guy that had a tremendous redshirt freshman season. What's your kind of take on him, and how much better do you think he can be in year 2?
I think he can only get better. I mean, he had a heck of a first year. He has a cannon, on his right shoulder. I'm actually really proud that he's from, the Orlando area. He's a great player to watch. I think the sky's the limit for him. I think ultimately he has to just stay healthy, try not to take as many shots as he did the previous season, and just execute. That's all you can do is execute each play.
Jacob Coker, who of course is one of the few quarterbacks who's had a chance to play for Nick Saban as a head coach and Jimbo, talked about how Jimbo is basically just the opposite Saban, and that Saban is so intense with his defense and Jimbo is so intense with his offense, and obviously that's no big secret. But even though people think they know how meticulous Jimbo can be, is it safe to say that most fans only just kind of scratch the surface on just how thorough he is with his offense?
I would say so. It's hard to make an assumption unless you're right into it. I mean, we all know he's a tough coach. For me, it was a hell of a transition coming from Jeff Bowden to Jimbo, just because you had a coach that was kind of, lax, kind of let you do what you need to do, but Jimbo's in your face, wants you to be perfect. So trying to be perfect is always tough, and I think Jimbo does a great job, and Saban does a great job of getting it out of his players.
All right, got to put you on the spot here. X, how is this game going to play out tomorrow night? We got to get your pick. What do you think?
I think we're going to win by 6. It's going to be a couple of funky plays.
Are we okay with that, FSU by 6? We'll take that, right?
I think they have a hell of a defense. We have a hell of an offense. We have a hell of a team. I think.
What's the difference? Why do you think FSU gets the win?
I give us a difference because I trust Jimbo's tutelage and I trust his training and preparation. I don't doubt what Xavier can do, but I know what Jimbo can do. So I'm going to go with the devil I know, and I know Jimbo can pull it off.
All right, I like that. Again, appreciate you joining us. Xavier Lee, leading Florida State to victory. Hopefully get another one tomorrow. Thanks for joining us.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Xavier Lee, everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks. You know, X was talking about it a little bit, and that 2007 season, it's Jimbo Fisher's first year as offensive coordinator at Florida State. It's Nick Saban's first as head coach of Alabama. And it was a time where both teams were really trying to get back up to where they were. And it's amazing to see, here we are literally exactly a decade later. Number 1 versus number 3 at another big neutral site game. It's sold out, and people forget the hype that was surrounding that game for two teams that ended up finishing 7-6.
Yeah.
And now you have two teams who are probably going to end up in the college football playoff. The hype and the buildup and just what's happened to both of those programs over 10 years is really nothing short of remarkable.
Well, it just shows what you do when you get the right head coach. I think more than any other sport, college football, if you get a solid head coach who knows what he's doing, who can put, Coach Fisher talks about the program, the system, the process. A lot of cliche buzzwords, but it is true. Once you puts his staple on it, once he's able to do what he needs to do, get out there, recruit that well, you can make a giant difference. You saw the thing, Alabama was floundering for years and years with all their resources and all their tradition with Shule and all the other coaches that they really couldn't do anything. They got the right coach within a year. Suddenly they were one of the most competitive teams in the country with Jimbo Fisher. Look at that. First year he's in, he made his mark. It really wasn't until 2000, probably 12, he really started to turn the corner. His process started to take over. But it just shows you how important that head coach of Ohio State, look at Michigan overnight. Suddenly they're relevant again. It is so much about the head coach, and that's why these are two of the best coaches in the country. That's why these are the two of the best programs. Consequences
for this game, it's kind of been debated.
Yeah.
Florida State has a really tough schedule. It's a draw with Clemson on the road. It's a draw with Florida on the road. It's a date with the Miami team a lot of people think are going to be better. The reigning Heisman Trophy winner is coming to your stadium. There's so many good teams that Florida State's playing, and it's also a product of how much better the ACC has gotten over the last couple of years. Do you think that no matter what happens tonight, tonight if you're listening to this, and tomorrow if you're hearing this live, do you think that no matter what, Florida State's got a shot at the playoff, win or lose?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. If you lose this game, if they run the table, they're in. There's no way you can lose to the number 1 team in the country and run the table, win the ACC, have one of the toughest schedules in the country, and not get in. I think the debate happens if you lose that second game. I still think there's some scenarios where you could get in, but obviously you lose a lot of your buffer. 90% of your buffer is gone, where if you beat Alabama, you can lose a game and you're still probably in the playoffs.
You have a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's why you don't want to lose this game, obviously, and put yourself in a position where it gets a little iffy down the road. So, yeah, but again, win, all problems are solved.
Now, I want to ask you an inverse question because, of course, Alabama has built such a sterling reputation over the last decade, literally from 2008 on, just about every single year. At some point in the season, they've been in the national title conversation. The SEC West is not as good as it's been. The guys that they're drawing out of the East are a Tennessee team that nobody really knows what to think about. They're replacing their quarterback, and their rotator is Vanderbilt, who is, of course, Vanderbilt.
What's up, Rooster?
So when you take a look at that.
All the quarterbacks, former quarterbacks coming. I got the Rooster in the house.
The Rooster, ladies and gentlemen. So that being said, if Alabama loses this game, are they still somebody who can make the college football playoff if they run the table?
Winning the SEC, come on. Can you even imagine a world we live in when the playoff committee denies the SEC champion a one loss that lost to a top 3 team not getting in? That's crazy. Now, the thing for me, though, what's different is Alabama's schedule, as you alluded to, is so much easier than Florida State. Effectively, I know LSU is ranked, but, they still don't have an offense. I don't see any chance in the world they could beat out. The only game they have that I put, this could be a game, is that Auburn game at the end of the year. The only scenario where they don't get in, they lose to FSU, they lose to Auburn at the end of the year, then they're probably not in. I think they can still very much run the table and they're in.
I think the other thing that you have to look at here is this, and it's an outside factor beyond the SEC and the ACC. The Big 12 has a title game now. Yeah. What happens if Oklahoma State runs the table and one of these two teams, Florida State or Alabama, ends up with a loss to a top 5 team? do you put in a Big 12 champion or do you put in a one-loss team that went out and played a game like this?
You can get all these crazy hypotheticals, but we don't see a bunch of undefeated teams. It just doesn't usually play. There's usually not more than one or two. A one-loss ACC champ or a one-loss SEC champ is in absence something crazy happen. I can't picture a world that happened. I'll tell you one thing, if it did, boy, would there'd be a lot of controversy. The social media, ESPN, everything would be blowing up over that.
It'd be quite the debate for sure. But we can only talk about the hypothetical so much. It's time to talk a little bit about the X's and O's in this game. And I know there's been a lot of debate about this. And, heck, even driving in, hearing Atlanta Sports Talk, driving into the Georgia Freight Depot, everybody seems to think it's two offensive lines with a lot of question marks versus two of the best front sevens in the country. It's safe to say whoever wins those battles between the trenches is going to end up winning this ballgame.
Well, that is kind of football 101. You win in the trenches 9 times out of 10, you're going to win the game. And here's one of the reasons, and I know by now people know I've picked Florida State to win this game. And one of the reasons why I picked FSU, earlier I was picking Alabama. I look at those two lines, and the bottom line is FSU has, especially FSU's defensive line against Alabama's offense, they've only got 2 full-time starters back at those positions. One guy switched from one side to the other. They got to replace guys. Their front 7, they have to replace 5 players out of the front 7. Now, we all know Nick Saban reloads. These are all 5-star guys. But they are playing a lot of them are playing their first game, or they have very limited experience going into this. And their very first game is against, some guys with a lot more experience. And guys, I think Florida State has more experience on the trenches on both sides of the ball. So I think they're catching Alabama at a good time. That's one of the reasons why I like Florida State in this game.
And it's also the idea that when you look back at the kickoff games that these two have played throughout the years, and neither of them have shied away from competition. Ole Miss was projected to be a lot better than they ended up being.
Well, they were a lot better early in the season. They gave Florida State fits, they gave Alabama fits, and then they started falling apart.
Oklahoma State was supposed to be a lot better in 2014, and they lost a lot of key pieces on that team. Alabama has played that really good Virginia Tech team in 2008. They played a decent West Virginia team in 2014. Of course, last year USC ended up becoming a monster, but in their first month under Clay Helton, they struggled a lot. Mm-hmm. I think it's safe to say that I don't think either of them, no matter how many of these big kickoff games they've played, have quite played in one with the magnitude of this, just in that both of these teams have established head coaches, they have established talent, and when you look at the rosters and you look at the recruiting and you look at the stars and the composite rankings and everything that all of those guys and all the recruitniks talk about 24/7, that are as evenly matched talent-wise as these two and with entrenched of coaching staffs.
Well, I think that's what makes this game so intriguing, because this isn't a bowl game, or this isn't where we've seen these teams. We know their strengths or weaknesses. This first game, you don't know. There's always some surprise. Well, this player played a lot better than we ever thought he was going to play. Came out, he blew up. Or, boy, this segment really underachieved. It's hard to tell at this point who's going to come out. Like you said, there's lots of talent on both sides of the ball. There's no doubt. These are probably the two most talent. You just go by recruiting teams in the country. But the defense, everybody is back for Florida State in defense other than a couple starters. Derwin James is back. But does that mean suddenly they're going to be all those struggles we saw last year, are they going to all disappear? They're there. We think they are because there's so much more experience. Derwin is back. But, again, you're going against a dual-threat quarterback. They're going to run some RPO. They're going to do the things that will Florida State suddenly be a lot better in this system? I don't know. We think so. But that's so much about this game. We're kind of guessing who's going to be good, who isn't, who's going to jump out. So that, to me, that's intriguing. We'll know a lot more about these teams in October than we do now. But the nice thing about this will tell us a lot. We're going to be right. It's not when you play a Louisiana Monroe, let's say they would open with them, we still wouldn't know much about this team. We're going to know a lot about both of these teams at this time, or in about, 30, 40 hours.
It's one heck of a measuring stick when you have these two going up against each other. And it's something that we've talked about a lot. You talked about that defense disappearing, and it did that a lot throughout the beginning of the 2016 season. It's been no secret that Jimbo Fisher's been very calm. He's been very cool. He's been very collected going into this game, when that really doesn't seem to be his MO a lot of times when he goes up against big games, especially when he goes up against a mentor like Nick Saban, a guy that he coached under for a very long time. I mean, you heard Xavier Lee talk about it earlier, just how thorough and meticulous he was in that game in particular 10 years ago.
But now he's had a whole offseason, not just a bye week. He's had a whole offseason to prepare for one game. And you got Louisiana Monroe next, so it gives him a buffer also before the Miami game. So you're right on that. That's what's interesting. That's intriguing, too. what surprises is Jimbo Fisher going to have? Is he going to go to more of a spread, more of a hurry up, which he doesn't like to necessarily do, but that plays into Alabama's weaknesses. There's some very intriguing storylines from an X's and O's perspective, I think, on both sides. The theme out of Alabama is when you talk to the guys at Bama Insider, they say they really want Jalen Hurts. They work so hard for him to become a packet posture, become him to throw the ball vertically down the field. Well, that's fine, and I know you want to, but that would play into Florida State's strength, that you're really going to do that in this game when you know you might not have a good of a chance to win if you go to that style. I don't know.
And it's also the idea that this time last year, this was another team that had tremendous hype. It had Dalvin Cook. It had a defense that was supposed to be extremely stout, and it played very well in the 2015 season. Jimbo Fisher seemed very, very uptight in camp. He didn't seem very happy with where his team was, and the first month and a half of that season really reflected that. Am I looking too much into saying things that Jimbo Fisher maybe feels more confident about his team's mindset more than anything going into the 2017 campaign?
Well, I've always said this about Coach Fisher, you're right. We get a little bit limited access maybe than we've had in the past lately, but I will say that if I were to ever play poker with Jimbo Fisher, I think I would eat him up because he wears his heart on his sleeve. He doesn't hide things. And not only that, you can tell the demeanor, the confidence, but also the times we do go out to practice, and you're out there all the time, Ryan, you don't hear as much screaming. Which means there's not as much correcting. I think last year was a lot of guys were still trying to learn what they're doing, get into the right position. I think there's so much experience, especially on that defensive side of the ball, and a quarterback coming back, he knows the plays. Now it's refining. It's picking up, okay, this play a little bit here, a little bit there, which I think he likes. He's more coaching instead of just trying to teach basics. Get lined up in the right spot, get your call right, these kind of things. So from that perspective, this team should be a lot more polished, and you shouldn't see those horrible breakdowns like we saw against Louisville and North Carolina early last year.
While we're on the subject of head coach, Jimbo Fisher's about to start his 8th season at Florida State. He's a guy who kind of all over the board when you ask him where you rank him in the idea of head coaches. He's won a national championship. He also did that with what might be a once-in-a-program type quarterback in Jameis Winston. Nick Saban disciple. Not a lot of Nick Saban disciples have had the success that Jimbo Fisher has had, and there's certainly no doubt about that. But there's always kind of been that hierarchy of coaches. There's always been that Nick Saban, Urban Meyer tier, and then right below that, there's sometimes those guys that are considered, they're really good coaches, but when the push comes to shove, where are they in that national championship picture? Where are they in that playoff picture? The Mark Ricks and, of course, the recently retired Bob Stoops comes to mind. Is this season important to how we see Jimbo Fisher as a head coach and how the national landscape sees him?
Well, yeah, I think from the national landscape, like you said, it's always intriguing. We talked about this on the Warchant report, which you can watch up on the site. But
nice plug.
Yeah, we've got to get that out there. But it's really interesting. I'm always intrigued by these coaching lists, and you get various media outlets ranking. Where are all the coaches ranking? You're right. It's always Saban, Urban Meyer, and then it's all a free-for-all from about 3 to 20. You never know where to put him. I've seen Jimbo Fisher all over the board, and I think people who put him at 20 are just being ridiculous or trolling. Obviously, he's won national championships. He consistently recruits in the top 5. Look at the winning percentage. I think I saw the stat. FSU and Alabama are the two most winningest teams since 2010. So he has to be up in that top tier. But having the once-in-a-lifetime quarterback in Jameis Winston is a blessing, obviously, but it's also a little bit of a curse on the perception of the coach. Because it is, did he win only because he fell into Jameis Winston? And maybe this is a coach that is good, but maybe can't get the team consistently to the playoffs or the national championship without Jameis Winston. Now, this is a season where everything's in place. You got the returning quarterback. You got the defense. Your preseason number 3. So I think you're right. I think if he falls short this year, you'll hear more and more of that narrative. Well, he had Jameis Winston the one time. Maybe he's not an elite coach. But I think if he gets at least FSU to the playoffs, especially if he gets him that national championship game, I think there's no doubt. Then I think you have to start penciling him in that top 3 right up there with Urban Meyer. Especially if he wins another national championship, then he's right up there, I think, with Urban Meyer as maybe the number 2. I think Saban's got number 1 right now, but I think he's right up there with Urban.
Football, of course, is an ever-evolving sport. It's not like baseball where, money ball can come into play, but at the end of the day, you hit the ball, you score runs. Offenses change, defenses change, schemes change, the way we approach things. But I kind of feel like 3 things have remained constant in football, period. We already mentioned one of them. If you win the trenches, you're more than likely going to win the game. And the second one that a lot of people tend to overlook, especially in big games like this, because they're just so looking for stars, turnovers. And throughout Alabama's dynasty, throughout what they've done over the last decade, Turnovers. The idea that they're going to make you blink and they're not going to blink themselves is a big reason why they've been successful. You had the stat, what is it? They scored 12 non-offensive touchdowns last year. That was the most in the nation.
Country, yeah. And not only, like you said, not only did they force the turnovers, but boy, did they make you pay. And like I said, 12 of those they instantly turned into touchdowns. Or they put you, or you turn the ball over, and they almost every time score right after that, and that is just devastating to a team. And the stat that I also threw out, I didn't see it in college, but I saw the NFL, and the stat was over 86% of the time. If you score either on special teams or defense, and the other team, you have at least one more or do it, and the other team doesn't, you're going to win over 86% of the time. Now, the other stat I saw, if you get a pick six, you win the game 91% of the time in the NFL. So, I mean, obviously, Alabama, you're not going to be much better than them. So if you already give them that advantage of giving another score, when you flip it like that, you're not going to win the ball game. So to me, that's why I put as one of my three keys to the game is Florida State cannot give an easy, score, whether that's a pick six, a kickoff return, or anything else, or even like a breakdown in the secondary and somebody goes for 80 yards. You can't do anything. This team is too good to give them easy scores.
I think the thing about the Florida State Seminoles that makes you feel good is, DeAndre Francois wasn't perfect at the beginning of the year. He got a lot better as the season went on. Had a completion percentage that was maybe a little bit lower than most quarterbacks that Jimbo Fisher's had in their first year, but also had a turnover margin that was very, very impressive. He kept the ball out of the other team's hands. I'm not so much worried about DeAndre Francois more than you have a bunch of new running backs who are getting ready to prove themselves, who are going out there. Yeah. Can you make sure that you keep the ball off the ground in the running game? That, to me, more than anything in the turnover battle, is important for Florida State.
Well, isn't that why? And I'm curious to get your take on this, Ryan, because I was on one of the Alabama stations yesterday doing an interview, and they were going, of course, they all know, Alabama fans know about Cam Akers, because at one time he was committed to Alabama, so they're very familiar with him.
Well, if you ask Ole Miss fans, he's still going to be at campus tomorrow.
Yeah. So the thing was like, we're going to see a lot of Cam Akers in the game. And I go, I'll tell you what, I don't know in this game you're honestly going to see him that much for exactly what you said. And I think at the end of the year, you probably see him a lot. You may see him running more than Jock Patrick by the end of the year. But I don't know in the first game in this big stage, it's an unknown. I think when you're a head coach like Jimbo Fisher, who's naturally going to be a little bit conservative on things like that, you put an unknown out there. If you do something, you do a couple safe things with him. But I think you're going to see Jock Patrick get the bulk of the carries in this. Maybe get a little Amir Rasul here and there. Maybe he gets a couple carries. But I just don't think you're going to put a true freshman in his very first college game in this kind of situation, and what, of course, the Atlanta folks are calling the GOAT game, the greatest opener of all time. I don't know if you want to put a true freshman who's going to be sky high in a game like that.
I've mentioned it on Wake Up before, and I think it bears repeating. 2014, Jimbo Fisher lost James Wilder Jr. and lost Devontae Freeman. He lost his two workhorse running backs. Dalvin Cook is considered maybe the greatest running back in Florida State history, and yet he didn't end up getting his chance until half the team gets hurt at Syracuse.
Yeah, what happens if Mario Pender doesn't go down at Syracuse? I mean, what happens? Do we have to probably wait another year until Dalvin Cook gets a chance to explode?
And even then, at that time, how long does it take for him to catch up? How long does it take for him to be situated in that offense? Because he got the hot hand, because he had a great moment, he was able to step in. Jimbo Fisher, we've talked about it on this game. This is not your typical opener. This is not one where you can roll the dice and take a couple chances. He's going to go with what he knows. He's going to go with Jock Patrick, who we know is a phenomenal runner, yards after contact. That's going to be a big deal against this Alabama defense.
Oh, yeah, it is. And I want to get into I'm going to kind of change topics on you a little bit because we talked about it earlier. We got to probably wrap this thing up here pretty soon. But the other thing is the special teams on this.
Hidden yards, that's the last thing I was going to get to.
This is the other thing I wanted to bring up because we talked about the turnovers. And this is an area on my matchup analysis, another play for Warchant you can read. And I gave Florida State it was pretty much even. I got to the special teams, and I think FSU has the advantage there. And I know I'm depending a lot on what we've heard out of practice from Logan Tyler, the punter, and Ricky Aguayo, that they're going to be more consistent, that got that first year under their belt. And I know you're big on the punting game. The fact that Jimbo Fisher, I think he spent more time on special teams work in the spring and the offseason than I've ever seen him do for the fact that he's putting three of his biggest star players in key roles on returns. You got Tavares McFadden, All-American cornerback, returning punch. You got Derwin James. A lot of people consider the number one player in the country returning kicks. You got Keith Gavin, from what we hear, maybe your top receiver. Those three guys are you kidding me? You put all three of those guys in returns and all the work they've done on special teams. So that's an area FSU absolutely has to win, and especially the punting game is Logan Tyler. Those extra yards, those hidden yards, as Jimbo likes to come, are so key. When FSU is going to get stopped sometimes. Alabama's got a great defense. When you get that ball, let's say to near midfield, and you got to punt, boy, you better pin them back. You can't have those line drive kicks. You can't have those shanks in this game. So pinning Alabama back and making them change that playbook where they've got to get conservative and can't open it up. That's such a big deal.
Yeah, Logan Tyler, who had a great camp last year, and even started the season solid, and it just kind of seemed to fall apart for a minute. And you could say the same thing about Ricky Aguayo, who had a great night against Ole Miss, and then kind of fell apart against North Carolina. You need consistency out of your special teams, and you haven't had a consistent place kicker and a consistent punter in the same year in quite some time at Florida State, even before 2013, because people forget Kason Beatty didn't have the greatest season in 2013. It's just that Florida State didn't have to punt a lot.
Yeah. I think they had the fewest punts in the country that year.
So I think it's literally been probably since Hopkins and Powell in 2011 since you've had a good returner in Greg Reed, you've had a good place kicker in Dustin Hopkins, and a good punter in Sean Powell. I think special teams can play a really big role in what Florida State wants to do, and not just kicking and punting, but in the return game as well. It's something that has not been great at Florida State for quite some time now, and Jimbo Fisher has certainly brought out the big guns to try to remedy that situation.
Well, I kind of liked it before even those two when he had Graham Gano. He just did both.
Onions, baby.
Oh, man, onions in that. It was still the best performance talking about punters I've probably ever seen was that the game against Wisconsin, man. I got to tell you, he must be a golfer because it would seem like he was hitting the wedge and that ball was just kicking back on the 2-yard line over and over again. That was fantastic. But, yeah, again, reiterating this, but, yeah, special teams absolutely huge for Florida. And are you excited to see Derwin get that ball? And are you more apprehensive that, oh, no, this guy might get hurt? Or are you like, what's this guy going to do with a ball in his hands?
Listen, if you want to win football games as a coach, as an organization, as a player, you can't play scared. And this is Jimbo Fisher saying we're not going to play scared with anybody. Our best athletes are going to go out on the field, and they're going to play, and we're going to use them how we need them, no matter how it is. What it takes to win is what we're going to do to win. Gene, before we wrap it up, I'll ask you what I usually ask an opposing person who covers a team every week when we do our interviews on Wake Up. Florida State wins the game if, Florida State loses the game if, and your prediction.
Florida State wins the game if the offensive line can hold its own. I would say they don't have to dominate. They just need to hold their own and do some decent protection for DeAndre Francois. And you said they lose if they turn the ball over. They lose if they turn the ball over. Score prediction. Here we go. Dun-da-da-dun, little drum roll. We need the sound effects. There we go. I like this guy. The guy just says we're going to win here. Fan goes by.
There it is. We're done.
There's the prediction.
Florida State wins, ladies.
Florida State, 27. Alabama, 24.
It's funny because no matter who I've talked to, I know Ira's got a score pretty similar. Everybody seems to think it's in that range. It's
in the 20s. Yeah, it just has that feel. I think that there's going to be some rust because you've got the offenses. First game there's going to be a little rust. There's some pretty good defenses, but at the same point you're going to have some breakdowns on both sides of the ball. So there will be some offense, there'll be some plays here and there, but you just have that feeling it's going to kind of be a slugfest. I would love it. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes down to a final possession. How cool would that be?
It would not surprise me at all. This game is going to come down to just the slimmest of margins. I still don't understand how this spread is 7 points with this team's way
It opened about right.
It opened perfect to me.
Yeah.
If I was a gambler and that line's 3.5, I'm not touching that at all.
What has happened in the last couple months to change? I don't really see anything dramatically happen on either team.
I had a chance to talk to somebody who does that for a living, and they said it's all public money because there's 2 rules in Vegas. Don't bet against the Patriots, don't bet against the Tide.
Well, there you go.
So it's that similar. Ladies and gentlemen, hope you're having a good time tonight. Hope you're having a good time while you're listening to this today. We got a game to win tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. Hope to talk to you on Wake Up Warchant here on Monday after a Noles victory, but regardless, we're going to be there right at 6 a.m. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Go Noles. We'll talk to you soon.